The first is, if you don't trust me, you shouldn't hire me, and I will tell you when it's time to worry. Until then, do not worry, because I haven't told you to, right? And so if you don't trust me, I shouldn't be your lawyer. But if you trust me, I'm telling you not to worry. So knock it off. Like, stop worrying until I literally look you right in the eye and say, and I've done it before, look you right in the eye and say, it's time to worry now. Like we're
time to wring your hands.
It's time to.
Hold on, wait.
You got a problem now.
So you tell them that they should worry?
Yeah, when they should.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I've chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what's stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are watching Spaghetti on the Wall. Ladies and gentlemen, back with another week. John Butler's in the house. What's up, dude?
How are you?
I'm great. Good. John Butler, the offices of John Butler, also jcbtax.com.
That's right.
So glad you're here because I want to dive into taxes and like how you are involved with, helping and what like some of the pain points of some of your customers and some prospects actually. So let's start with tax law in terms of like, how are you helping people when it comes to like tax law? Are you like checking the accountants? Are you, what does that all entail?
So that's not exactly what I do. Basically tax lawyers, for the most part, can be divided into two categories: the transactional lawyers and the fighters. That's basically where it divides. So the transactional lawyers are the guys who are more like, I don't want to pay the IRS taxes when I pass, or I want to sell my company. How do I pay the least amount of taxes possible? That side of tax I do for some people, but generally for people who stay after the first type, which is the fight type. Mm-hmm. And that's more of what I do. My background's in criminal defense. I was a public defender in Orleans Parish for a while. I have a degree in math, so those two kind of go together to lend themselves to fighting the government when it comes to taxes. So my practice is divided into basically two parts. The first is what I call organization cases, which are people who haven't filed tax returns for a very long time. So, a lot of people come to me and say, look, I haven't filed taxes in 15 years. And
that long? How did they get away with it?
Because the IRS isn't too worried about them. Because basically, for most of the time, people build up this idea in their head, right, that the IRS is this big, dark, horrible place, right? This big, dark entity that's going to get them. Right. And 9 times out of 10, it's not true. Now, 1 time out of 10, it definitely is true. But 9 times out of 10, it's true. And usually I say to them, look, you haven't filed taxes in 20, 25 years sometimes for some of my clients. And I say, look, I got a 2-part test to tell you whether or not you're going to be able to get through this, and it's going to be annoying, right, and cost you a lot of money, but you'll be fine, or whether or not we need to really, put the clamps down and think about it. First, are you a politician? Because if the answer to that is yes, then we're in for a rough ride, right? But if you're not a politician, you're probably going to be all right. And the second is, do you have overseas assets, right? Because those are the two things that the IRS is looking for. They're looking for people in the public eye, Wesley Snipes, et cetera. And they're looking for people who are trying to get money out of the country without paying taxes on it. Those are the two spots where the IRS is really trying to get people who go a long time without filing, right? So there's a lot of misunderstood issues there. The failure to file penalty in the U.S. is 25%, but the failure to pay penalty is only 2.5%. So right there, the IRS is kind of signaling to you, we care a whole lot more about knowing where your money went than we do about you actually paying us back, right? So that's the first hurdle.
Are you allowed to say that?
Oh yeah, they'll say that. It says it on their website. So that's the first hurdle, is kind of getting that perspective of like, right. Look, this isn't about the money. This is about the fact that they don't know where you are, right? That you have all this money moving around. Sometimes people are running companies. I had a guy who ran a landscaping company making tens of millions of dollars, not filing taxes. Well, the IRS doesn't know where that's going. I mean, they have a mandate from Congress to watch for terrorism funding, right? They have a mandate from Congress to watch for drug trafficking, money laundering. The only way to really get in a ton of trouble is to not tell them where it's going, because they just assume it's going somewhere nefarious, right? So that's one type of case I handle. And those cases don't really need a lawyer. They need a really good organizer, because there's really nothing going on there legal most of the time. but it's a big project to organize, compiling and filing 15 years of back tax returns.
Poof.
And hold the client, the client's hand through the process, which is usually the hardest.
And that's what you guys do.
Yes, and that's usually the hardest of the deal. Usually it's keeping the client's anxiety at a point where he's like, actually I don't want to file. It's like, no, stay with me, stay with me, right? It's like a 5-year-old going on a roller coaster. So, that's one type, which is I haven't filed in X number of years. And sometimes we had a case like this the other day. The IRS won't even be expecting a return because someone else has told the IRS how much they made. Right. So if they have a W-2 job for 20 years, let's say, a lot of times the IRS isn't even looking for a return. So we bring them in and we say, look, you're done. We called the IRS and they said they already know what you make. The taxes were taken out before you got the money. Have a nice life. Right. And so those are the easy ones. So that's more the organization cases. The other category is cases where there's an actual fight. And those cases are either about what the person owes, right, how much, or whether or not they've committed a crime. And so those cases are the cases where they actually need an attorney to make arguments, right? Where it's okay, we have to make a decision about whether or not to cooperate or whether to fight. We have to make a decision about what to argue in court, whether to a judge or a jury, about whether or not you owe the tax or whether or not to settle, right? Whether or not to take X, debt and move on and try and resolve it another way, or whether to fight it. So those are really the two areas where I practice is, for the most part, is one, organizational cases where people haven't filed for a very long time and it's really hard to keep all the trains running on time to get them compliant, what we call compliant, which means you're good, see you later. And then the fight cases where they're either trying to put my client in jail or they are trying to allege that my client owes more money than he said he owed when he filed his return.
Wow. And so do you bill hourly? Like, are you like a personal injury attorney that well, no, you can't be because you're not getting money from the government, although maybe you could. I mean, as far as decreasing the amount owed.
We just had a case where you can. Unfortunately, it's unethical to do that. But only personal injury is allowed to charge a percentage. We just had a case that came in Thursday, I think, where we were able to get someone $410,000 refund because they brought us their taxes and they were like, I really don't think these were done right, and they were correct. It involved a victim of a Ponzi scheme, and so it actually you get a deduction if you're the victim of a Ponzi scheme. You don't have to pay taxes on the money that you contribute, and so we were able to identify the Ponzi scheme, prove that it was a Ponzi scheme, and we won on appeal. And the client got his $410,000 check last Thursday.
Wow. So
that would have been nice to be on a contingency, a personal injury type situation. But no, we charge 99% of the time we charge hourly. Okay. There are cases that are big enough that we charge flat fee per month. That does happen. That's almost always in the criminal realm where there's so much work, there's so many documents, and the stakes are so high that if we charge hourly, we'd be charging $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month because we're working so hard on it. And so in those cases, it's just not feasible for anyone to fund a criminal defense against the IRS the last 3 years on an hourly rate. It's very difficult. So criminal generally goes flat fee per month and civil generally goes hourly.
And so you guys, I guess, make up the difference because it takes longer?
Yeah, and it involves a ton of paralegal work usually. So usually the criminal cases are extremely paper intensive. And the thing about criminal cases with the IRS, and usually if you were a potential client, right, in my conference room, let's say I'm selling to you, right? Hey, hire me for this. This is the point where I would say, if you listen to nothing else, listen to this, right? This is the most important thing. Never be in the middle with the IRS. You either fight them or you play nice with them. That's it. You never, ever get in the middle. You never, ever say, well, I don't really want to pay, but I also don't really want to go to trial. Right? Because then they get really annoyed because they spend 2 years of their agent's time and their lawyer's time and, getting geared up for your battle. And then right before the end, you go, the client goes, oh, well, actually, I probably do owe it. And that's the only way you can really, make them angry. So you always want to be either the fight in fight mode and you don't get out of it. And when I say fight mode, I mean give me a warrant or get out of my house, fight mode. Or you want to be in, how can I help you today, Mr. Agent? You want to be in, what documents would you like? Would you like to see my medical records, right? You do anything they say. you never want to be in the middle, because if you do anything they say, you'll get credit for it, right? You'll get a better sentence, get a lighter sentence, whatever. If you're in fight mode, you won't give them anything that you shouldn't, right? And so when you're in fight mode, it takes so much time to make sure that the documents you're giving over don't contain something incriminating, that charging hourly for that would be unreasonable, because you have to have people going through them and making sure, I mean, every page, because they will. So, they'll subpoena your bank statements going back over many years. They'll subpoena all your emails. They'll subpoena all your text messages. And you got to make sure as you're going through them that you don't accidentally hand something over that's like, hey, I know I owe these taxes, but screw them. Like, you can't, if you can't, you got to make sure that you don't accidentally hand over anything incriminating. So those cases are so work intensive that doing anything but a flat fee is tough. All the other cases are issue cases at the IRS, right? So we're usually not arguing over facts unless we're in criminal. We're usually in civil cases, like no one is, if we're having an argument about how to depreciate a tugboat, we usually both agree the tugboat exists. We agree what it looks like. We agree how old it is. We agree when they bought it, right? There's not a lot of paper. It's a lot more arguing. It's a lot more I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, than you don't know what happened, right? And in tax, whenever you get into what happened, like the facts, that's when it gets expensive, and that's generally when we go to a flat rate. When we all agree on the facts and we don't have to investigate or do anything like that, that's when it's much more about intellect. It's much more about just making the right argument, and it's much cheaper if you go hourly.
Why would somebody, like when people arrive at your doorstep, are they like apprehensive about coming to you? Are they, like, how would people know that it's time to hire you?
That's a good question. I almost everyone is apprehensive, basically, virtually everybody. Usually 95% of them have anxiety that is way out of proportion to the situation they're in, as someone who does a lot of tax work, right? I would say probably 99 come and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I got in this situation." And I'm looking at them like, this is not a big deal at all, right? And you're fine. It's like a traffic ticket. So, but the big issue is that there is that 1% who should be worried, and generally it's inverse. If the people who are really worried generally shouldn't be, and the people who are not worried generally should be. That's been my experience.
Sure.
Doing tax, right? And so it's interesting the way it works. The way it always works is, and this is actually, I don't know if this is a too deep an answer to the question, but the way I explain it to my people, right, is I say two things to try and help them be less anxious during the process, right, of getting compliant with the IRS, settling with the IRS, getting it behind them. The first is, if you don't trust me, you shouldn't hire me, and I will tell you when it's time to worry. Until then, do not worry, because I haven't told you to, right? And so if you don't trust me, I shouldn't be your lawyer. But if you trust me, I'm telling you not to worry. So knock it off. Like, stop worrying until I literally look you right in the eye and say, and I've done it before, look you right in the eye and say, it's time to worry now. Like we're
time to wring your hands.
It's time to.
Hold on, wait.
You got a problem now.
So you tell them that they should worry?
Yeah, when they should.
And what does that do when, in terms of like, when you tell them, all right, it's time to worry? Are you prepping them to go, this is probably not going to be a good favorable outcome for you? Is that what you're telling them?
Really, it's only in criminal cases. So in criminal cases, a lot of the time you don't know what's going on, right? Your client tells you their side, but the IRS doesn't have to tell you their side, right? Their investigation. So all criminal IRS investigations go the same way. At the beginning, they meet with your client, and that's the test. That's when you have to decide fight or flight. That's when you have to decide, am I going to fight them or am I going to cooperate? Is that first meeting. There's a rule called Rule 111 that describes how a tax investigation works. And tax is in Title 26 of the Criminal Code, or of the U.S. Code. Most criminal offenses, in fact, all of them, are in Title 18. So tax is in a completely different section of the book than, felon with a firearm, embezzlement, money laundering, all these other federal crimes you hear about.
Right.
So it has a completely different procedural scheme than these other crimes. And so you know exactly what's going to happen in the case. The first thing is they're going to meet with you and they're going to meet with your client. And you can walk out, which I've done. You can just say, look, I don't like your questions. I don't like the vibe here. I don't like your paintings. I don't like your table. I don't like your little conference room here with no windows.
The IRS?
Like we're getting the hell out of here, right? We're done. So at the beginning, though, they'll give you a chance. They'll say, hey, do you have something, like basically, do you have something to tell us, right? And then they shake your hand no matter what you say, and they leave, and you leave. And then they investigate in the real world for a while. And then they bring you back at the end, and they say, we finished our investigation. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us? And you get a second chance, and you can say, well, yes, or you can keep fighting, right? So usually the time to worry conversation is between the first and the second, where the IRS agent, and, obviously I know most of them, right? The IRS agent might call me and say, hey, John, I want to tell you about something we learned in an interview or got in a document or whatever. And I might say, okay, that changes things. Let me bring my client in and talk some sense into him, right? But in 15 years of doing this, I've only said that once. I've only had to have that conversation one time.
Do they have to tell you? No, he did. He did that because he likes you.
I wouldn't say it's because he likes me. I'd say it's because there's this rule called Rule 111, which only exists in tax, where you can get a massively favorable plea arrangement if you agree to plead guilty during the investigation. And so most criminal cases, you don't get that chance. Most criminal cases, you have to be charged in order to plead guilty, but tax is different. Tax has this rule where you can short-circuit the investigation whenever you want and say, I'd like to make a deal. And so that's an extremely powerful weapon. It's this Rule 111 and Rule 116. They're very powerful weapons. And so the agents, who are very nice, by the way, the agents are not bloodthirsty. They're not trying to get people. They're not playing gotcha, right? When the agent identifies that you're not, typically what happens is there's a tipping point where the agent identifies that you're not an arch criminal, right? Where the agent realizes like, okay, this guy left $1.5 million, say, in income off his 1040s in 3 years, right? But that $1.5 million didn't get laundered and then reinvested in a drug cartel. It just, he just bought a yacht with it and the rest is in his basement, right? And they're just like, okay, this is not that big of a deal. That's when a call like that might be placed. We're like, okay, we've gone down this track enough. We don't really need to, file a bill of information, have a trial. Hey, John, why don't you just listen to me and bring your guy in, right? So, but like I said,
that's when you're like, hey, you need to worry.
Correct. And then, but like I said,
that's
only happened once in 15 years.
That's out of how many cases?
Quite a few. I don't know. I'm not sure. Probably. Definitely over 100, but I wouldn't know how many. I mean, everyone asks people how many cases, and they're like 700. It's like, no, dude, it's like 290. Like, are you kidding me? Right? So it's probably like what do you have, like 50 cases at once? So it's probably, I don't know, somewhere between 100 and 160, something like that. So criminal cases, civil cases, a lot more. So that's the first thing that I do to try and relieve anxiety, which is I say, if it's time to worry, I'll tell you. And that helps a lot of people. The second thing I do is a little more in depth, but it's basically the A. I call it the A, the B, and the C, right? So, and this is what I would say to anyone listening who has tax issues, right? Is to try and use this system to try and calm down so you can do something about it, right? Because the big problem is when people come to me so anxious, they can't function. And I'm like, okay, so where were you working in 12, right? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, let's just take a deep breath, right? We need to write it down on the form, like where were you working in 12? So the A is what's actually happening. Right? The C is the consequence of what's actually happening, and the B is the reason why the C will happen, right? So the A is you haven't filed taxes in 15 years. This just happened the other day. The C is you're worried about going to jail, right? What's the B? Do you know anyone who's gone to jail for not filing taxes for 15 years? No. Okay. Why don't you Google it? Why don't we see? Okay, you didn't find anybody at your income level who has gone, right? Who has gone. So what makes you think that you're going to be the first? Right? And they're usually like, well, I probably won't be. I'm like, yeah, probably not. We should probably just do the returns and make a deal, right? So I like to say, based on that ABC system, that so a lot of times clients will call me all upset, and I'll say, well, what's the B? Right? What's going to link what's happening to what you fear? And they usually kind of just look at me like, well, I don't really know. It's like, okay, why don't you stop thinking about what you fear and start thinking about what could happen, right, to make what you fear come to pass? And most of the time, there's nothing, right? It's never happened before to literally anyone, right? Ever. So I like to say to my clients when they come in, when we do tax law, we make decisions based on what's probable, not based on what's possible, right? So when you try to do this, if you make decisions based on what's possible, you'll make terrible decisions because they'll be too safe, right? So we make decisions based on what's probable, not based on what's possible. So is it possible that I file 15 years of back tax returns for you, right? And you got to make a settlement on $1.3 million and they clamp the irons on you? Yeah. I mean, not filing tax return is a crime. You didn't do it for 13 years. Is that possible? Yes. But it's not probable. What's probable is they're going to go, thank you very much for coming into compliance. What are you going to do about the $1.3 million? And then we're going to have another meeting, right? And we're going to settle it.
That's probably a great mindset to just take with you on a daily basis, regardless.
Yeah, it came out of criminal, like, because people get so anxious. And it's like, look, man, the worst case is horrible in all my cases. But I can't think of one where it's ever happened, right? Where the absolute worst case, like everything went wrong, everything broke, and someone actually got what they were afraid of. I don't think it's ever happened, right? But some of the tales that have been spun in my conference room, right? Like,
yeah.
Here's what's going to happen. And I'm sitting there like, okay. Like, why don't you just go get your tax returns done? Like, none of this is going to happen.
That's really cool, man. I like that. I like that concept. It could just be applied to business too. I mean, business, relationships. I think the tough conversations that people need to have, and they don't like hit it head on,
right?
Because I think that they build it up in their minds too much as to like the worst possible scenario, and it grows.
And I call that catastrophizing, right? Catastrophizing, which is like when you take a thought and you just make it a catastrophe.
Yeah,
right. And it's like so many, basically, probably 9 out of 10 of my clients do that, right? They come in, they say, I'm under audit. They're going to find this, and they're going to put me in jail. It's like, okay, I've done about 200 audits. People have found a hell of a lot worse than this, and they don't put you in jail. I'll give you an example. I had a client, this was a long time ago, it was like 2011. And one of my earlier cases, actually, my client thought it'd be a good idea to, the auditor asked for his bank statements, right? So he whited out his bank statements, wrote in new numbers, wrote over them a bunch with a car, so they'd look, worn in, put them through a photocopier on low contrast like 90 times, and made some pretty good, like, looking bank statements, okay? Like, these things look pretty, he goes on my client when he did that, he hired me after he did that, but then he brings it into the auditor, who unfortunately is retired now from the IRS, great auditor, and hands it to the auditor and says, here are my bank statements. The auditor had subpoenaed the bank statements from the bank, like the actual bank statements. They just put them next to each other. And it's just like, why are these different? And he's like, I have to step out in the hall. And he called me when he stepped out in the hall, right? He's like, you got to come down here right now. I did something dumb. So he got caught instantly, right? Like, it's just like, what are you doing? So I go down there and I walk in the room. I shut the door. As soon as I shut the door, the IRS agent and I just died laughing. Like, you got to realize they're humans. They're people.
Yeah.
Right? They're not robots. Like, she didn't get that and go, I must arrest taxpayer. Like, that's not how it works. Like, she thought it was funny. Now, yeah, she fined him for fraud, no question. But, like, and we couldn't get out of it. We didn't appeal. Like, we just took it on the chin, right?
Sure.
So he ended up owing, and this kind of dovetails with another thing people don't realize about tax. He ended up owing $1.9 million, and he got in a payment plan at $600 a month. And so a lot of people say, like, how do you get it?
Wow.
How is that possible, right? Like,
it's amazing.
What a brilliant piece of legal work. Well, not really. Because
you should just say it is.
Yeah, not really. Because people don't understand the IRS has 6 ways to solve a tax debt. 6. And all of them are geared at a different type of person, right? So it's basically impossible to construct a civil situation, like a non-criminal situation, where one of the 6 doesn't work. I haven't seen one yet. I'm not even sure how you would do it, but the IRS doesn't care how much you owe. They care if your returns are filed, and they care how much you can pay, right? They don't want you living like a king while owing taxes. They won't let you do that.
Right.
But if you can only pay $600 a month, you submit verified financials, what you make in a month, and I have paralegals that do all this, right? What you make in a month, what you spend in a month, all backed up by bank statements, right? What kind of car you're driving, where you're living, and they think it's all reasonable. All they're going to do is take 2/3 of your disposable income. They know they can't get blood from a stone, right? And so it's important. There's a law for the United States that says that the IRS can only use the least intrusive methods available to collect the balance, right? Which is a really important law. So we're not talking about a bank. And that's one of the most misleading parts about what I do to people who come to see me is they think it's going to be like dealing with like Fidelity Bank, right? Where it's like, oh, you want 360 grand? Well, let me put it in my computer and figure out how much you pay a month, right? The IRS doesn't do that. They don't care what the principal is. They care how much you can pay, which is not what that's not what the bank's like, right? The bank is like, the principal's 360, your payment's this. I really don't care what you spend, right? You never turn that into a bank.
Right.
So it's a completely different mindset because it's based in law, right? There's tons of laws that tell the IRS how they have to do things, whereas with a bank, there's nothing. It's just a guy behind a desk going, what do you think you can do on this, right? So I like to tell people who come to see me, if you go to see someone who's going to settle your tax debt and they give you a round number, you should run away because it's a calculation. So the idea that it would be exactly $40,000 is basically zero. The idea that it would be, right, this guy's paying $609. He's not paying $600. He's not paying $700. He's paying $609. Why? Because that's what the math says he can pay, right? So if someone says to you, well, I heard this the other day, some tax relief agency told somebody, let's offer them $10,000 and see what they do. It's like, well, I can tell you exactly what they're going to do. I'm going to send you a very nice, strongly worded letter that says to stop sending the mail because it's not a real settlement offer, right? It's not a mathematical computation. We don't negotiate with the IRS like we negotiate with a bank. It's like, hey, how about 10 grand? They won't even respond to you. It's very math based. It's not, it's not buying a house. That's not how you settle a tax debt. So all that started by saying even that dude who did all that with his bank statement was fine. He's not a politician.
Wow.
And he didn't own anything offshore. So this isn't to say that you can just do whatever you want with the IRS and it'll be good. They actually have toughened up lately. But it's still, the reason why he was okay is because after he did that, he went right back in the room with me kind of making him and apologized and said, I am so sorry I did that. I will bring you the correct bank statements tomorrow. And so we decided to go with the not fight way.
Yeah, right? For sure. After that,
and he, if he got back in there, just be like, I don't know what you got from the bank, but those are the right statements. He might have had a problem, right? But
damn.
But since he was,
that's audacious.
Yeah, he was quite a gentleman. He was quite.
That is audacious.
Yeah, he was a good guy. So he's still my client now. So he's a good dude, but he made a mistake there. That was a misstep.
That's wild, man. So you own two. You said you own two restaurants as well.
I own a piece of two. I'm in the Coquette restaurant group, so I own 15. I own some of Coquette, and I own some of the restaurant Lingua Madre down in the Garden District. I got into that in about 2012.
Nice. So tax law and then restaurateurship.
Yes. So I met the owner of Coquette. He's a great guy, Mike Stolzfus, the head chef, and back in 2011, 2012, I met him professionally, and he's a great chef, but he needs some help with the numbers side, beyond what an accountant could do. Mm-hmm. So I decided to take the job of yelling at everyone, basically, about how much we were paying in beans or whatever. And I remember having a lot of confrontational conversations with people.
So you were like John Taffer.
Who's that?
Bar Rescue.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Where he's all like, what the fuck is happening over here?
Yeah, I was like that. I was like that guy if he only had a telephone. I was like that. Like sometimes I'd like the phone away from my face. Like, we're not paying that much for, jelly or whatever the fuck. I don't know. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it went really well.
Everybody needs that.
Yeah,
everybody needs that guy in their business, man.
It went good.
Dude, you've got some amazing stories. Tell them where they can find you.
Sure. So, John Butler, tax attorney. Anybody hasn't filed their returns, anybody needs to have a criminal civil case with the IRS, we are at jcbtax.com. I would tell you our office phone number, but I don't know what it is. I know it's 504-285. Other than that, I'm not sure.
There you go. We'll find it.
We'll find it. just Google it. Google it.
Yeah, Google.
Just don't click the pay ad. Go to scroll down. Don't click the pay ad. I have to pay for that. And then, that's pretty much it. I don't really have any social media or anything. So it's jcbtax.com. You can just send me an email directly, john@jcbtax.com, if you have any issues, anything like that. My firm also my partner is a civil litigator, so we also do business litigation, stuff like that. So generally we pull people in on the tax side and then move them over there once they're already clients.
Rock and roll. All right. Hey, man, thank you so much for being here, dude.
Sure.
Appreciate you being here. Of course. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Spaghetti on the Wall, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment. For all of your social media marketing needs, podcasting, we got you. And you can watch Spaghetti on the Wall anywhere where you can watch a podcast. Spotify, Apple Music, Google us. You can find us. And we'll see y'all next week.